What if, in trying to protect the one you love, you ended causing even more pain and separation? Rebekah's story shows us how a mother, when trying to guarantee the future of her favorite son, created a cycle of betrayals and lies that affected her entire family. Instead of protecting, her choices ended up alienating those she loved most. How far would you go to ensure the best for someone? And what are the consequences of trying to control destiny? Stay with me until the end, and we'll discover how Rebekah's decisions change her family forever, and what we can learn from it. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell, so you don't miss any impactful stories. Rebekah was a simple young woman, daughter of Bethuel, and lived with her family in a distant land called Haran. She lived her routine, going to the well every afternoon to get water, without imagining that fate was about to change her life in a dramatic way. One day, an unknown man appeared. His name was Eliezer, Abraham's servant, who had been sent on a very special mission, to find a wife for Isaac, his master's son. When Eliezer arrived at the well, tired and seeking divine guidance, he prayed silently, asking God for a clear sign. He wanted the woman who offered water to him and his camels to be the one chosen by God for Isaac. And it was then that Rebekah, unaware of the request, approached and, with a kind smile, offered help. Without hesitation, she drew water for the man and his animals, a gesture of pure generosity, but one that at that moment carried a profound meaning, something she could never imagine. Eliezer, amazed, soon realized that God had answered his prayer. That young woman, so kind and humble, was the answer he was looking for. The story was just beginning. Upon discovering that she was from the same family as Abraham, Eliezer asked Isaac for her hand in marriage. Rebekah, faced with such an unexpected proposal, knew that her life was about to change completely. But accepting this calling would also bring challenges she couldn't foresee. Rebekah, still surprised by the proposal, accepted Eliezer's invitation, recognizing God's call to a future that she had never imagined. He left his homeland and headed towards the unknown, with a heart full of expectations and uncertainties. Upon arriving in Canaan, she was welcomed by Isaac, a gentle, calm man marked by his family's history of faith. They got married, and the union was blessed, as if heaven smiled upon them. It seemed like everything was in the right place, that destiny had taken its course. The first years of marriage were peaceful, but as time passed, Rebekah began to worry. Just like Sarah, the mother-in-law she never met, Rebekah faced the same dilemma, the difficulty of having children. Time passed, and the promise of continuity in Abraham's lineage seemed threatened. Isaac prayed incessantly, and Rebekah also cried out in silence, seeking answers. After long years of waiting, God heard the couple's cry, and Rebekah finally became pregnant. But from the beginning, the pregnancy wasn't easy. She felt a constant struggle in her belly, as if there was a war going on inside her. Worried, she sought God in prayer, asking for explanations for what was happening. It was then that he received a disturbing answer. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples will separate themselves from your womb. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. The words echoed in his mind. What did this mean for the future of his family? Rebekah spent the following months of her pregnancy with a mixture of joy and worry. Although she was happy to finally be a mother, the struggle she felt in her womb made her restless. The words that God had spoken to him continued to echo in his mind. The elder will serve the younger. That was not a common thing to hear, especially in a culture where the firstborn always carried the greatest honors and responsibilities. She knew something extraordinary was about to happen, but what exactly? When the moment of birth arrived, the tension that Rebekah felt throughout the pregnancy finally made sense. 2 boys were born, but right away you could see that they couldn't be more different. The first, who came out with a robust appearance and covered in hair, was called Esau. The second, clinging to his brother's heel as if he had already disputed his place from the womb, was named Jacob. The scene was almost symbolic, as if, from the first breath of life, Jacob was determined not to be left behind. As the boys grew older, their differences became even more pronounced. Esau, strong and adventurous, became Isaac's favorite, who appreciated his hunting spirit and physical strength. Jacob, on the other hand, was calmer, preferring his mother's company and tasks near the tent. Rebekah, naturally, got closer to Jacob, protecting him and watching him with special affection, perhaps already sensing the fulfillment of the words that God had spoken to her. But with this affection, doubt also grew in his heart. How could it be possible that the youngest, that introspective boy, could one day take his brother's place? The years passed, and the difference between the brothers became even more evident. Esau, always in search of adventure, became a skilled hunter, strong and fearless, the pride of his father, Isaac. He spent long days in the fields, exploring, hunting, and bringing to the table the foods that pleased his father so much. It was evident that Isaac had more preference for Esau, the one who seemed made for the arduous life of the field, full of strength and vigor. Meanwhile, Jacob, the youngest son, preferred the tranquility of home. He helped Rebekah with the daily tasks, staying close to the tents and taking care of the details of family life. More introspective, Jacob observed everything around him, and his mind always seemed to be working in silence. The relationship between him and his mother was special. Rebekah saw something in Jacob beyond the quiet and sensitive boy. There was a deep connection, a kind of prediction of the future, something that perhaps not even she herself could explain clearly, but that made her protect Jacob in an almost instinctive way. The rivalry between the brothers, although subtle at first, began to grow. Esau, in his busy life, did not realize how much his mother favored Jacob. He fully trusted his position as firstborn, certain that one day he would inherit everything that belonged to Isaac. However, Rebekah did not forget the words she had heard from God during her pregnancy. In silence, she followed her children's every step, as if waiting for the right moment to intervene. And it was on an ordinary afternoon that destiny gave the first sign. Esau returned from the field after another long and exhausting day of hunting. The sun was already setting on the horizon, and his body was overcome with hunger. His hurried steps took him straight to the tent, where he smelled the irresistible smell of soup that Jacob was preparing. The aroma, warm and inviting, made his stomach growl immediately. Esau, tired and with the typical impatience of someone who is hungry, looked at his brother and asked bluntly, "Let me eat some of this soup, I'm starving." Jacob, who always observed and thought before acting, wasted no time. He knew that this moment was an opportunity, and his words came out calmly, almost calculatedly. "I'll give you the soup, but first sell me your birthright." For a brief moment, Jacob's request sounded strange. Esau, the firstborn, the one who had the right to everything that belonged to his father, now found himself faced with an unusual choice. But, overcome by hunger, he did not hesitate. In his mind, what was his birthright worth if at that moment he felt like he was going to pass out from hunger? And so, without thinking twice, Esau swore and sold his right to his younger brother for a simple dish of lentils. As Esau devoured the soup, he barely realized the importance of what had just happened. He disregarded something that, by tradition, was non-negotiable. Jacob, on the other hand, knew that this agreement was more than a simple exchange of food. The words of God, heard by Rebekah so long ago, began to be fulfilled. But that was just the beginning of a path full of deceptions. Time passed, and the promise made by Esau in exchange for a plate of lentils seemed forgotten, buried beneath the routine of life. However, something was about to happen that would rekindle all the tension between the brothers. Isaac, now old and almost blind, knew his end was approaching. Feeling the weight of age and the weakening of his body, he made a decision that would change his family's destiny forever. It was time to bless his firstborn, Esau. In the tradition of that time, the father's blessing had incalculable value. It not only ensured the continuity of the lineage, but also transferred authority and prosperity to the chosen son. Esau, without imagining what awaited him, was called by Isaac, "My son," said the old patriarch, "go to the field, hunt me an animal, prepare a tasty meal, and bring it for me to eat. Then I will give you my blessing before I die." But Rebekah, always attentive and still marked by God's prophecy, listened to the conversation. And at that moment, an audacious plan began to form in his mind. She knew that Esau was Isaac's favorite, but she also knew that Jacob, his youngest son, was the one destined by God to lead. The father's blessing could not go to Esau. Rebekah, without hesitation, called Jacob and, with a firm look, shared her plan. "Go to the herd. Choose 2 of the best goats. I will prepare them as your father likes. And you, dressed in Esau's clothes, will go to him to receive the blessing in his place." Jacob, astonished at what his mother was proposing to him, hesitated, but Rebekah had no doubts, and the moment of greatest deception was yet to come. The silence inside the tent seemed heavier with each passing second. Jacob, dressed in Esau's clothes and covered with goat skins, waited for his father's reaction. Isaac, despite his blindness, still felt that something was not completely right. He reached out a trembling hand and touched Jacob. The roughness of the hair on his arm made the old patriarch relax a little. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," he murmured, still suspicious. Jacob held his breath. Every question, every touch from his father made him tremble inside, but his mother had been clear. The blessing must be his, whatever the cost. Isaac, still suspicious, approached his son and smelled him. The smell of Esau's clothes dispelled his last doubts, and he smiled softly, convinced that the son in front of him was really the firstborn he loved so much. Then Isaac ate the meat prepared by Rebekah, and after the meal he stretched out his hand over Jacob and began to pronounce the blessing, a blessing that was to be Esau's destiny. "May God give you a dew of the heavens and the riches of the earth, abundance of wheat and wine. May the people serve you, and the nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and your mother's children will bow down to you." With these words, Jacob's fate was sealed. The blessing that promised prosperity, dominion, and power was bestowed upon him. Jacob had barely left Isaac's tent when the sound of Esau's heavy footsteps began to echo through the camp. He came from hunting, exhausted but satisfied. The hunt had been successful, and now he was eager to prepare his father's favorite dish and finally receive the long-awaited blessing. Without suspecting anything, Esau entered Isaac's tent with a confident smile on his face and said, "Father, get up and eat the game I brought you, so that you may bless me." Isaac, upon hearing that familiar voice, was confused. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice breaking. Esau, without understanding the reason for the question, replied, "I am Esau, your firstborn." At that moment, Isaac's heart raced, and he began to tremble. "Who then was he who hunted and brought me food? I have blessed him, and he will be blessed." The cruel truth fell like lightning between father and son. Esau, upon hearing Isaac's words, felt a lump form in his throat. Fury and pain mixed in his chest. "My father, bless me too, please," Esau begged, but the blessing had already been given. It was irreversible. The anguish grew as he understood that he had been deceived by his own brother. He cried out in despair, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac, with sadness in his eyes, replied, "I have made him your lord. All your brothers will be his servants, and he will have plenty." The words resonated like a hammer in Esau's mind, and at that moment a deep hatred was born in his heart. Esau's cry of pain echoed throughout the camp. His fury, mixed with hurt, was palpable. He paced back and forth, breathing heavily, replaying in his mind what had just happened. His own brother had deceived him and taken not only his birthright, but also the blessing that legitimized him as his father's heir. Esau felt that his life, until then certain and guaranteed, had collapsed in an instant. In the midst of the revolt, Esau swore an oath in a low but hateful voice. "As soon as my father's mourning is over, I will kill Jacob." The promise of revenge now ran like poison through his veins. What was once a controlled sibling rivalry had now turned into a real and deadly threat. Esau, with his strong and imposing appearance, was not someone who made empty promises. And everyone knew it. Rebekah, attentive as always, didn't take long to realize the danger that was brewing. Her ears caught Esau's bitter words, and her mother's heart was filled with fear. She knew that the decision she had made in helping Jacob deceive Isaac now had a high price to pay, and her youngest son, the one she loved so much, was in grave danger. Death loomed over the house, and something needed to be done. Rebekah quickly went to Jacob and, with urgency in her voice, said, "Your brother Esau wants to kill you. You must flee to my brother Laban's house in Haran. Stay there until Esau's anger passes." Jacob, with no time to question, began to prepare for escape, knowing that leaving his home could mean a long exile. Jacob, with a heavy heart and a head full of thoughts, began to pack his few things. The idea of running away from home, abandoning everything I knew, was terrifying. He knew that his brother was filled with hatred, and that Esau would not hesitate to fulfill his promise. Fear accompanied him with every step he took towards the unknown. Rebekah, no matter how strong she was, couldn't hide her sadness. She knew that by sending Jacob away, she might never see him again. But a mother's love spoke louder. She needed to protect him, even if it meant a painful separation. Before he left, Rebekah went to Isaac. She, with measured words and genuine concern, told her husband that Jacob should go to his uncle Laban's house in Haran to find a wife among his people, just as Isaac had done years ago. Isaac, who was still reeling from the confusion of what had happened with the blessing, agreed. He blessed Jacob once again and sent him to the land of his ancestors, not knowing that the real reason for the trip was to escape Esau's fury. With Jacob's departure, a cloud of silence and tension settled in the house of Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob, now alone, walked into the unknown, knowing that his journey was just beginning. Each step seemed heavier than the last, and the longing for home was beginning to bite. But he knew he had no choice. Esau, in his rage, was a real threat, and the only way to survive was to get as far away as possible. After days of traveling, Jacob finally arrived in the land of his uncle Laban. Fatigue marked his face, but the relief of having left Esau behind drove him forward. When he met Laban, he was warmly welcomed like part of the family. Laban, a man of soft words and shrewd eyes, seemed happy to see his nephew again. But deep inside, there was something more. Jacob, in turn, had no idea that he was about to encounter a reality very different from what he expected. Jacob was soon enchanted by Rachel, Laban's beautiful youngest daughter. From the first moment he saw her, he knew he wanted to marry her. The desire to start a new life with her grew every day, and Jacob, with the sincerity he had left, proposed to Laban to work 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand. Laban readily accepted, but in his thoughts he was already hatching a different plan. The 7 years flew by for Jacob, who, every day, saw his love for Rachel grow. For him, time seemed short, because his heart was full of expectations of a happy future with her. However, on the night of the wedding, what seemed to be the beginning of a new phase in her life took an unexpected turn. When Jacob, already married and in the darkness of the wedding tent, discovered that the woman at his side was not Rachel, but Leah, his older sister, the shock was immense. Laban, with his ability to manipulate situations, justified the mistake by saying that it was customary in his land to marry the eldest daughter first. Jacob, now married to Leah, felt the weight of betrayal fall on his shoulders like never before. He, who had manipulated his own father to steal Esau's blessing, now tasted the bitter taste of betrayal. Laban, with his cunning, had spared no effort to ensure that Leah, his eldest daughter, was married before Rachel, and Jacob, even frustrated, could not prevent what had happened. Even so, Jacob did not give up on Rachel, hurt but determined. He agreed to work 7 more years for her. It was a difficult task, but his love for Rachel surpassed any obstacle. Thus the years passed, and Jacob was finally able to marry Rachel, but not without carrying the feeling that his life was constantly surrounded by betrayals, whether by his own hand or by those of others. The time in Haran was long and full of challenges. Laban continued to manipulate Jacob on several occasions, changing his salary and creating more difficulties. Jacob, however, prospered, as God blessed him abundantly in the midst of adversity. The lies and manipulations of his life were like a constant shadow, but at the same time, Jacob grew, learning the harsh lessons that destiny imposed on him. Rebekah's story leaves us with profound lessons about love, deception, and the consequences of our actions. In trying to secure Jacob's future, Rebekah manipulated the circumstances, believing she was protecting her favorite son. However, his decisions generated pain, separation, and a series of disagreements within the family itself. Esau, betrayed, swore revenge, and Jacob was forced to flee his land, living years of exile and facing mistakes similar to those he practiced. This story teaches us some important lessons about the choices we make and how they affect our lives. Rebekah, wanting to protect Jacob and guarantee his future, ends up using lies and manipulation. But in trying to control everything, she loses what she loves most, her son. This shows us that often, trying to force a situation can have painful consequences, even for those we love. Jacob, on the other hand, learns that what we do to others comes back to us. He deceived his father and brother, and was later deceived by Laban. This lesson of reap what we sow is clear in his life. We cannot escape the consequences of our actions. Esau, overcome by anger, teaches us that the desire for revenge only harms ourselves. When we are filled with hate, we lose peace. But over time, forgiveness can bring healing if we choose to let go of the anger. In the end, Jacob's journey shows us that even when we make mistakes, there is always a way back. Facing the past with sincerity and humility is the first step to moving forward and building something new. The big lesson here is that the truth, even difficult, will always be better than a lie, and that, despite mistakes, there is always a chance to start over. If you like Rebekah's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming, be sure to like this video and share it with those you love. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible